Hello Internet. As all of us horror fans know, asbestos removal is a richly mined theme in the horror genre, but tackled no better than 2001's excellent Session 9. I'm going to try and do things a little bit differently from usual. I saw the flick yesterday and I checked out about half a dozen other YouTube reviews for the film. There aren't that many, but they all share a common theme. They're all fairly short, and all of the reviewers, to a person, say you really have to see this movie, and I don't want to give very much of it away because you need to go in as cold as possible, and to talk too much about the plot would be to start spoiling the plot. And I throw my hat into that particular ring. So the first portion of this, I'm going to do exactly the same. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to give you spoiler-free context and reasons why I think the movie's great. And then after I've done that, I'm going to put my spoiler hat on because I do enjoy dabbling beneath the skin of movies as well. So for anyone who's already seen the movie and just wants to hear what this pasty Englishman has to say about it, we can chat freely about the movie whilst I'm wearing my spoiler hat. And anyone who hasn't seen the movie, you can stop watching the video at that point. I'll flag it up, I'll make it really obvious. Then see the movie, then come back and see what I thought about it. Watch the video twice. Hell, I need the views, and it'll be good to see you again, you know. Okay, let's talk about plot. As much plot as you need to know before seeing the film. We follow a team who do hazmat work, hazardous materials, and they're contracted to basically rip out and remove asbestos from the Danvers State Mental Institute, a real place now sadly pulled down. So there's a team of 5 guys, regular working Joes, who have a very, very tight deadline to do the job inside an abandoned mental hospital. That's it. Things go bad. This is a horror movie after all. So a little bit later on we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the plot, because the movie is about much more than that, but that's the setup. That's all you need to know. And the main strength of this movie is the location. I think it's probably fair to assume that, writer-director Brad Anderson, and I've read a little bit of bits and bobs, a couple of interviews with him. I know he was from the area. I think he used to drive past the building quite a lot, so he was very aware of its presence in the local community. I think it's fair to assume that the location came before the plot, which is no slight on the plot at all, because the setting, the location in this movie is key to the feel and vibe of the movie, along with the way that it's shot and the way that it's lit. It's like the bastard cousin of the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. It's gone to seed. It's walls, the paint's peeling from the walls, it's dank, it's dirty. Homeless people use it for shelter, a nice little touch. Right near the start of the film, the security guard says that an awful lot of the people that come back there to sleep are ex-patients who have become homeless, and it's the only place they know, and they're sort of drawn back to it. But the whole vibe of this place infects the entire movie, and one of the things that's beautiful about it, I don't know how much to believe this or not, but David Caruso says that they did very little set dressing in the place, just a few additions here or there. They dragged chairs and desks and things in from other places into the rooms that they were using, but pretty much everything supposedly is authentic. Whether that's true or not, once you're inside this place with these guys, that's the feeling that oozes throughout the movie, and it is an uneasy movie, and it is an unsettling movie, and the location is key. I hate the phrase, oh, the city's a fifth character in this movie. We really wanted to make London a character in this movie. You hear it time and time and time again. In this case, that's fair. That is a fair thing to say. The Danvers State Hospital is a glorious location. From the outside, it looks wonderful and imposing. Inside, there's just this strange sense of entropy and decay and toxic history. Going hand in hand with the setting is the way that it's shot. Um, Sites that I've been to read up about the movie make a big deal about this being the first film that was shot digitally at 24 frames a second. I don't know what any of that means. All I know is the film looks great. If you haven't seen the film, I imagine when I say an old abandoned mental asylum, you're now potentially picturing the kind of cinematography for Insidious or The Conjuring. But most of this film, like 90% of this film, is shot in broad daylight. Daylight's streaming through the windows. It's very bright and it's very airy. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that the cinematography of this reminded me a lot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It feels a little grainy, it feels a little grungy, but it's a very bright and light movie. Exactly like Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, if you want to try and get a vibe for the movie that I'm giving off, I've already name-checked The Shining, and I've already name-checked the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If that's piqued your interest, another film that I think it has a little commonality with is a film that came out, I think just a year before, The Blair Witch Project. Not in the lo-fi, shaky cam nature of it. This one's very much more assuredly directed, although it does, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and like Blair Witch Project, it does have a documentary feel of camera movement and directing style. The camera's very free-flowing. We do feel like we're in the space with these guys as they're working, which is so important to the feel of the movie, because it is about the space and how the space, like the Overlook Hotel, affects the people within it. I really hope that's piqued your interest, because this is a movie that sort of came and went, but for me it's one of those movies that, because it doesn't get trumpeted a lot, can really get under your skin. If you've seen my review of The Babadook, which I rate highly, I actually think that has been to some extent hurt by some of the hype. I think the praise for The Babadook is correct and accurate. I think calling it the best this and the best that for a year, a decade or whatever has hurt it, because people go in with high expectations. It's little gems like this that you might not have seen and probably won't have heard of, that if you just pick it up and check it out, it's one of those movies that does get under your skin. It's not in your face, it's not blatant, but the things that happen in the movie and some of the subtext is icky, in a very tactile way, like The Babadook. I'm still thinking about this movie, and I watched it yesterday, and I'll probably be thinking about it for a few more days, thinking that I could have done a better job with this review, but we're going to press on. The final string of strength to this movie's bow, that's a bad image, is the cast and the characters, which go hand in glove, and I'll explain why I've just mangled that. It's an ensemble cast, and certainly at the time the film was released, David Caruso was the biggest star in it. Some of the other actors have achieved a much greater level of fame since, specifically Josh Lucas, but they all work with each other. It's a true ensemble cast. No one is showboating in this movie, and the characters that they play are real, relatable, fully rounded characters. This is not a group of desperately beautiful teens being picked off one by one. This is a group of 20 to 40 something, maybe even 50 something men with real relatable problems. And it's when the horrors of the asylum's past and the horrors of these men's lives start interweaving that things start to break down. Perhaps it was a tough sell to get the ticket buying demographic. You know, everyone's after these 4-quadrant movies now, and everyone wants the tweens and the teens and the 20-somethings to go and buy tickets, which is why we get a lot of lowest common denominator filmmaking now. Maybe it was a tough sell for people to sit and watch the problems of a bunch of grown men, blue-collar workers. But the older I get, and it is happening, I am getting older, despite that pact I made, there must have been some fucking small print. I'm down a soul, but I'm still getting older. But I can appreciate stuff like this more. Don't get me wrong, I love watching teenagers get carved up, but there's such a verite feel to this. You really do feel like you're hanging out with real people in a real place. And lost my train of thought there, but what I wanted to say is it works to the strengths of the movie that the director is willing to stay with these characters and stay on these characters and just let their stories slowly unfold, rather than having to ram home a scare every 10 minutes. I think it means that by the time the film reaches its conclusion, you're pulled along that much more. So, I hope I've sold it to the people who haven't seen it. It's really, really worth checking out. It's a slow burn character study, and there have been some imitators since, but none have bettered it. The movie still crops up in internet discussions. It's still mentioned. I think it's still yet to find traction as a real cult classic, but the people who love it really love it and are almost evangelic about it. Because one of the things I love about the horror community is when we find something that's really good, we want to share it with everyone else, and I really want to share it with you. Session 9's well worth your time. If you haven't seen it, press stop now and come back later. If you have seen it, let's talk about some of that creepy ass shit. Dear viewers, I am now wearing the spoiler hat. Watching it again in 2014, 13 years after it was made, it struck me that the desperation of our head of the hazmat team, Gordon, is even more pertinent now in the financial crisis, or the wake of the financial crisis, than when the movie was actually made. In the context of the movie, he's a new father, so he and his wife are suffering from real exhaustion and the stresses of new parenthood. But he owns this business and he's under extreme pressure. He's lost his last 2 bids, so he has to win this bid, otherwise the business goes under. That plays out even more current now than it did. In a little while we're going to talk about a line of dialogue when Gordon's looking down a corridor and he sees this shot, but without David Caruso there. And in voiceover we hear a voice say, "Hello, Gordon." we're going to come back to that, because that's a sticking point and a bone of contention for many people, how they choose to view this movie. But we'll find that voice again, and we discover why the film is called Session 9, when one of the workers, Mike, is going down looking at some of the breakers because his machine's gone off, and finds a whole room's worth of archived material, and he breaks open a box marked evidence and finds the case files of a former patient there called Mary Hobbs, and he finds a little reel-to-reel tape player, and he finds the reel-to-reel tapes of her psychiatric sessions, 9 sessions in all. The pieces start to fit together, with her psychiatrist discussing with a now adult Mary Hobbs an incident that took place when she was a child. And these sessions are dripped through the movie and start to inform what we see happening to the people in the facility. And it is deliciously ambiguous. But I want to talk a little bit about Mary Hobbs herself, because you see in her notes that she has 3 alters or alternate personalities since this trauma that take over to fulfill specific roles. The first one is a small girl called Princess, and that's her, I guess, back when she was a child when this event happened. And she lives in Mary's tongue, so she speaks of all the childish things. There's a boy, sounds to my ears like a little Cockney boy called Billy, and Billy lives in her eyes, and he's seen everything, but he can't tell the doctor what happened when Mary was a child, because it's his job to protect Mary from all the horrible things, and he wants Mary to be happy. And there's a third alter called Simon, and throughout the movie the doctor is trying to coax Mary, Princess and Billy to let him speak to Simon. Now, the creepy effects that they put on the audio with these warped tapes, so the voices sort of skitter and do all sorts of weird sonic things, reminds me slightly of the audio recordings that Damien Karras makes of young Reagan in The Exorcist. To me, to my mind, these are creepy as hell. When you're hearing interviews with Mary, and then all of a sudden someone else is in the room and she's speaking in a completely different voice, and you get slightly more of the puzzle and slightly more of what happens to her. That just sets the tone for me, especially since we're given towards the start of the film some of the history of the Danvers Institute, that it was the place that pioneered prefrontal lobotomies, which was to put a spike through the tear duct here and just mash out a portion of the frontal lobe of your brain, and the only outward signs that you've had anything done is a black eye for a few days. The history of accessing repressed memories, which caused the previous patient to misremember satanic abuse at the hands of her father and her family, and child sacrifices, which was a reflection of a real spate of satanic cult paranoia that went through the States and the UK in the 80s, I believe, and caused an awful lot of kids to be taken away from their parents and into care. And then it turned out that none of this had ever happened. A scene where Hank thinks he's found a cache of, he has a cache of old coins and watches and earrings and things like that in a hole in the wall. And when we see the reverse angle, he's actually reaching into a furnace where they used to presumably burn the bodies, almost like a concentration camp. holdover. The history of the hotel, I almost said hotel, I'm going Shining. The history of the hospital, the sanatorium, what part does it play in what's going on now? Does it just inform what's happening now in the present day, or is it affecting it? Is this a supernatural movie, or is this a psychological thriller horror movie? I'm not going to be able to answer that for you, but I can tell you what I think. But to do that, we need to talk about Simon. One of the best bits in the film is where Simon makes his presence felt in these recordings with Mary Hobbs, and and her voice changes. Oh, it's so creepy, and he speaks very clearly and calmly about what happened. And she had an argument with her elder brother, who smashed her doll, and he just slips in and takes over. He introduces himself to her and goads her into killing her brother, cutting him to pieces, and then persuades her that so she won't get found out, she should go to her parents' bedroom and kill both of her parents. And the ending of the movie, almost, where the psychiatrist asks where he lives, princess in the tongue, Billy in her eyes, he says, I live in the weak and wounded. Round about this time we also find out that Gordon has killed his wife and newborn child. And here's the crux of the thing. On Mary's sessions, mirroring and reflecting what's happening now with the team, I find it very interesting that in the sessions there are 5 characters. There's the Doctor, there's Mary, Princess, Billy and Simon, and within the hospital now there are 5 members of the crew, with Gordon presumably being the analogue for Mary, the one who's repressed memories and has cracked. And next time I watch it, I think I'm going to see if there are analogues for other characters. Certainly Gordon's nephew strikes me as as Billy, the one who wants to protect and look after him. That's a very interesting reading of it, and perfectly valid. There's nothing supernatural that happens in this film, so it could just be a meditation on mental breakdown and violence and repressed memories. It could also be a supernatural horror film, because that Hello Gordon that I mentioned a little earlier, when Gordon first turns up at the sanatorium, is Simon's voice, and Gordon doesn't listen to the tapes. And later on, when we get in flashback, it's completely spelled out to us that Gordon has killed his family. You also hear Simon, as he's remembering, giving him permission to do it, do it, do it. So an awful lot of people think that Simon is a demon, that this is a movie about supernatural possession. I like that. There's no bold evidence for it, apart from the fact that the voice Gordon hears is the same voice. He's obviously had a psychotic break. He's disassociated completely. There's horror enough in the way we treated the mentally ill. There's horror enough in the real world scenario of a man's business going under, and his desperation and his acting out on his desire to want to kill his wife and kid. This ties in with some of the impulses in The Babadook. Please watch Babadook. There's horror enough in all of this, the breakdown of friendships and murder, just stone cold murder that happens in this film. So if you want to read it as a psychological piece, it's still creepy, it's still nasty. If you want to read it as a supernatural piece, it's there. And if you like that, and I like that little flavour, then Simon is one of the most elusive and in his own way, in its own way, horrible original creations. It's just it's a name and an impulse. I give people permission to do the things that they want to do when they're at their weakest and their resolve is down. So is Simon a demon, or is Simon the little voice in all of us that when we're strong enough we suppress and damp down, but when we're weak and broken and fractured, he can step forwards? Don't worry, I'll take control, I'll sort it all out. And yes, I give you permission to take a knife to this person. However you want to read it. I've seen it twice now. I saw it yesterday. I'm not sure which side I come down on, but I just can't get over "Hello, Gordon." When I was watching it with my girlfriend, and as soon as that line happened, she said, "Oh, so has he been there before? Is he remembering from when he was there before?" And there's a lot of internet speculation that Gordon himself was a previous patient at the asylum. I don't think the timeline bears that out. I don't think there's any hint of that. There are some characters. Caruso's character has known him for years and years and years and years. So there's no real hint of that. But you could argue that there is a case to be made there. Some people get enormously frustrated with ambiguous films, but I think if the ambiguity is consistent with everything that's come before it, I think it's worth it, and I think this movie earns it. A lot of movies since have followed a template like this with a twist, so I don't know, fresh eyes now, this might seem generic, but I still think this one is probably one of the most watertight films of this template that I've seen. I think it does carry it through to the end, and I think it does it really, really well. The other thing of note, if you're interested at all, the deleted scenes on the DVD show you that an entire character was cut out of the movie, and it just goes to show how work in the editing room can completely change a movie. So there is in the deleted scenes, so we're getting into ephemera now, because the cut of a film as it is and as it's released is the story that's told. So I think deleted scenes and things like that are just curiosities, really. But there are scenes of a woman sleeping rough in the sanatorium, and it's very strongly hinted that she is a previous patient that has now come back here. I would have really liked it, the way this woman looks, and we see a picture of Mary Hobbs. I don't think it's supposed to be Mary Hobbs. I would have loved it if there had been a stronger suggestion that it was Mary Hobbs there as well. That would have added a nice other dimension. But having watched them, you could see with that included, there would have just been another little strand to the sort of whodunit aspect. That was probably a bit too much. I can see why they cut her out. The place itself holds enough ghosts in its history that you don't actually need a physical presence there. You don't actually need the shot to continue and pan up and you see a figure standing there in shadows and then disappearing. You don't need all of those cues, because it's all the stuff that's going around in here, I think, that works much better. If you're watching this bit, I'm assuming you've already seen the movie, so you either agree with me or disagree with me. If you've got any strong views one way or the other about Simon, whether it's a supernatural film, whether it's a psychological film, put some comments down there. I do reply. You get a guaranteed reply. Damn, it's a really good film. I wish I could invite you all around and watch it again with you. I live in the weak and wounded. I can't get over it. It's going round and round in my head. There's just something animal about it. Something instinctual. Amoral rather than immoral. If you haven't watched it, I hope you enjoy it. If you have watched it, I hope you've already enjoyed it.